now, without further ado, I want to transition over to Lee Steinke, who is our afternoon MC. Lee is the event producer for Conversations for the Future. She comes to Foundation for the Future from a background as a scientist and as a business executive with a track record of delivering value through science, strategy, and operations. Her career spans Fortune 100 to small nonprofit organizations, and she was most recently on the executive leadership team of a billion-dollar PE-backed energy company. Lee chairs the advisory board for the Rocky Mountain Association of Geologists and is a program management consultant of space at Space Foundation. She holds a bachelor's degree from UNC Chapel Hill and a master's from Yale and an MBA from Wharton. Welcome back, Lee.
Thank you, Leo. It's great to see you. And Pete's back. So Peter Garretson, a senior fellow in defense studies at the American Foreign Policy Council, is an independent strategy consultant who focuses on space and defense. He previously was the director of the Space Horizons Task Force at the U.S. Air Force Air Command and Staff College. He has 33 years of experience working for the Department of Defense and served his country in the United States Air Force. He is currently working on his PhD in public policy at Auburn University and has his master's in aviation and human factors from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Mr. Garretson is a former member of the National Space Society Board of Directors, a thought leader in the area of space development, and he is currently writing a book on the great power competition for space resources. Welcome back, Pete.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm posting my contacts on the side in case people want to look that up or follow along. But yesterday I provided a number of thoughts, a number of slides. And Michael asked me today to sort of talk about, in particular, what might happen if we were truly able to crack this nut, truly able to do that. So I won't take it for granted that, that there aren't a few late joiners who've just come. So let me just start by recontextualizing what we're talking about. So if you're joining late, we're talking about the concept of a truly revolutionary green energy system and an associated suite of technologies that could be very transformational across a tremendous number of sectors. So the idea is to take solar cells and place them up in Earth orbit where the sun always shines and where they can collect many, many times the amount of sunlight that they could collect on Earth, where it's stronger, where there's no weather, where there's no night, and where it's virtually never in shadow. And then to take that energy, collect it and transform it into a way to wirelessly beam that power to the ground in a technology that's very well understood and has been demonstrated as far back as the 70s. And that is and we're talking about something that's not small, right? We're talking about something that is truly ginormous, that in its final instantiation that you might have heard Jim Veda talk about for baseload electricity, you are talking about something that would be the weight of an aircraft carrier of 10,000 metric tons, that would be, on the order of 7 or 10 kilometers across. That beaming antenna, itself would be like a kilometer across. So these are many, many times larger than anything humanity has ever contemplated building or doing in space, and represents a truly gargantuan market that, energy being on the order of 8% of GDP and having a direct growth ratio is astounding. And so, and again, as I said yesterday, you would not be building just one, you would build, as many as there might be demand. And I would remind the audience that we grow annually at a compound rate of between 2.3 and 3% energy growth. And that does not look as if it's abating. And we are going to be adding, 1 to 2 billion more people on the Earth before we sort of cap out at our max natural population. So what's amazing about this renewable energy source is that if we could build it, it would be 24/7 and city baseload appropriate, which means that unlike the solar cells that we, hopefully are all trying to put on our houses, this is an energy source that operates through the day and through the night and is appropriate for entire cities, for entire industries. Now, why is this important? Because this truly is the biggest idea in space and in energy. It's important because it would allow us the possibility to truly transition from an economy based upon an energy economy and an entire economy based upon combustion and burning and all the things that come from that into a fully electrified society. And if you think about the incredible progress that America made when it went for projects like the Tennessee Valley Authority and rural electrification, that brought opportunity to just an incredibly high number of people and truly allowed us to have the civilization that all of us on this call at least are enjoying, where we have electrical lighting, we may have electrical stoves, we may have electrical air conditioning. We are able to live and persist in environments where we couldn't. We have clean water. That paved the way, from a world where the health of our nation was so low that we had to turn away most people who were applying for military service because they did not have enough teeth, to the world that we have today. And I think somebody's got their microphone on because I can hear some typing. All right, so where are we today in this amazing possibility? Well, we're at a very, very early nascent stage. If you think about today, the incredible proliferation of the global positioning system and its abilities, right? We track all of our packages online. We travel in our cars using global positioning maps. We know exactly where the boundaries of our houses are. We're able to do precision agriculture. We're able to guide robots, to do precision agriculture. We now have self-driving cars. There probably was not the possibility of anybody truly foreseeing how vast and important that would be, or the fact that the few billions of dollars we spent orbiting the initial GPS constellation would return over $1 trillion so far to our economy, and hundreds of billions, a year. $1 billion a day is what the GPS brings forward. Now, there's historically a direct gearing ratio between energy and GDP. And long ago, I remember hearing a presentation talking about, building out, a total grid of approximately 50 terawatts, and that the expected, return on investment, was on the order of growing the global GDP tenfold from that, right? So we aren't just talking about an energy system, we are talking about a wealth generation system that can make our entire planet 10 times richer or more. And not just richer in terms of dollar amounts, but in terms of truly important health outcomes. So consider that we have the other 3 billion across Africa and South Asia and other developed parts even of South America. As those people come online, right, they are transitioning from a dependency that, where their fuel might, like in South Asia, be cow dung, which is exceptionally poor for lung health. And they're burning candles. I mean, imagine how much less effective your own children or you would have been in your studies if you could only study by candlelight. Imagine, if you could provide clean electricity instead of those things for lighting, for cooking, for heating, for cooling, for electrification. how much of an impact you would have and how much human potential you would be liberating in the process. And it's not just in the developing world. Consider that in our own country, our reliance on a combustion energy infrastructure has a lot of downsides. The amount of pollution that we put into the air leads to all kinds of lung disease. There are radiation byproducts that happen from coal, and we're also wasting precious resources. The resources that we use today from our fossil fuels are resources that, once we burn them, they are never again in that same useful state. So just as Saudi Arabia is trying to reduce its own petroleum usage so that it can make use of higher quality petroleum products like rubbers and plastics that come from it, there are better, higher value uses that we can put our own fossil resources than burning them. When we burn fossil fuel resources, and even when we heat things through nuclear fission, or even if we were to crack nuclear fusion, it also would essentially be producing steam and running through a process. We require vast amounts of cooling water that our stressed states could be better using for our agriculture and for our industry. Or, in some cases, we use hydroelectric plants that result in damming of rivers and disruption of ecosystems. So by switching to a more environmentally benign, and I truly believe that space solar power is the most environmentally benign energy system that I've seen so far, we provide a way that we can shift our fossil resource to higher end products and reduce the pollution that it's causing, which would include carbon pollution, the possibility of undamming rivers, and the possibility of a vastly increased lifestyle by transitioning, much more to electrification. So let me point out that a system like this enables full conversion to electrification of almost all of our transportation infrastructure. That we can be in a position where all of our cars are electric, where all of our industries are electric, and where we don't have the corresponding pollution. Now, one of the pollutions that few people talk about is just the waste heat pollution. So to give you an example, right, all Carnot Systems, by which we mean any system that makes its power by burning something and heating up a working fluid, their best efficiency is typically, between like 30 and 35%. And what that means essentially is that of the energy that would have been there initially, only 1/3 is making it into the grid. Or perhaps a better way of putting it is, for every megawatt that you're putting into the grid, you are putting 2 additional megawatts of waste heat into the Earth's biosphere and environment. And in many cases, you're dumping that into our rivers. Even with ground solar, because those ground solar is on the ground, and even if they were to one day approach efficiency of 50%, which they're not right now they're closer to 20-30%. But if they were at 50%, that means that for every megawatt you're putting into the grid, you're still putting another megawatt of waste heat into the environment. And that's why you see heat islands around terrestrial solar. And even if we were able to crack the massive storage problem and be able to fully make use of the terrestrial solar resource, we have to face the limits of growth problem that at 2.3% growth, it'll only be about 300 years before we would have to cover the entire Earth with solar cells. And so we have to consider what is the best system for land usage, and where the average or normal piece of land that could be used for photovoltaics would be 5 or 6 times more productive if it were used for space solar power rectenna. Now, what I didn't tell you so far is how much better a rectenna is. So while a photovoltaic cell, while a Carnot system like coal or nuclear or fission are putting out, 2/3 of their energy in waste heat, and while solar might be putting out an additional amount of waste heat equal to what it's putting in, a rectenna is on the order of 85% efficient. So you're only putting out 15% inefficiency. And so not only are you doing the best that you can to conserve the Earth's land and the best you can do to conserve the Earth's water, you are also providing a potential engine to even remove carbon and to remove waste heat. All right, so it's also important to consider that an undertaking like this creates a massive amount of jobs. So at one point in time, the International Academy for Astronautics had estimated that a fully developed space solar power industry could be on the order of 5 million new jobs globally. Now, I hope that the United States would be aggressive and want to capture those new jobs, not only because of the impact that it will make upon us, but because this is an opportunity to lead the world to a truly better place and make use of all the potential geopolitical resources on that basis. We also have to consider that energy translates directly to geopolitical power. From the very first energy system, which was agriculture, which led rise to how large armies could be, to how large states could be, and to the reason why we had states that attempted to capture land, to the to coal, firing our coal warships, and then to petroleum that is most of our power projection and transportation capability today. Energy matters in the expression of power, but in a much deeper sense, energy produces power. So consider the coercive power that Russia's gas pipeline exerts over Europe, or the coercive power that a constriction in Middle Eastern oil or gas can exert worldwide. Wouldn't it be great if energy was supplied from free people to free people so that they were free of that level of coercion? And wouldn't it be great if that were a technological capability that was in the hands of free people, generating not only economic wealth for ourselves, but economic uplift for the entire world? Well, if that's a world that we want to have, and those are just the terrestrial benefits. Let me point out that a world where we have built solar power satellites enables a world that is hundreds or thousands of times more capable of funding in-space exploration and development and doing vast projects that we couldn't think about funding on the public budget. A vast, vast world of opportunity beyond Earth as well. But the first thing is the greening and gardening of planet Earth, the shifting of industry off Earth to allow a greater greening of our planet. So if we want a world like that, what do we need to do? Well, this administration has an amazing opportunity to use the National Space Council to provide direction that our country has never had. We have never had top-down presidential direction to mobilize the space industry in favor of green energy, or to do its part to use its green energy capabilities to avert concerns over climate change. So we need a presidential directive organizing interagency efforts on space solar power. And the types of things that should do is to organize which agencies are going to be doing fundamental research that benefits multiple companies, which agencies are going to be organizing public-private partnership efforts, which agencies are going to be working on the fundamental incentives, which agencies will be helping with the regulatory, how it will be applied and regulated, and who will be purchasing as an anchor tenant from the government. We also need to consider scale, and we need to be mindful of what is happening in our competitors. So China has in their master plan to industrialize the moon to build solar power satellites at scale. And so it's not enough to have a return to the moon just to show the flag. We have to have a presidential directive specifying industrial output targets and manufacturing technology developments for the Artemis base station on the moon directed at space solar power production. And finally, the government needs to put in place all the necessary incentives and systems to allow public-private partnerships, including Defense Production Act Title III and the Space Act that Foundation for the Future is pushing, in order to provide the financial infrastructure to lower the cost of debt and enable the possibility that the United States can prevail and be the leader in a technology that can truly uplift our civilization. And with that, I will pause and take any questions.
Thank you, Pete. You talked a little bit about the sort of setting the right expectations for the different agencies, clarifying who's in charge of what, who does what. Can you give examples either of how you envision that or of how that's gone wrong on past efforts?
All right, so what I have learned being a warrior for space solar power for 15 years or so is that you can't start with the ideal of where you might want it. You have to reward success. So, where we have tried in the past to give money to hostile agencies, it has, fallen flat, right? So at various times, there have been efforts to get NASA and Department of Energy interested. And to date, both organizations, in my view, have manifestly failed the American people to realize the significance of what they could provide. Right now, we have two champions, one of which I think you'll hear from later after me, but we have the Air Force Research Laboratory executing money in the Space Force budget given to them by Congress that I think is, moving forward in a way that should make the American people proud. And the other is Dr. Paul Jaffe through the OSD, Operational Energy Fund at Naval Research Lab. And these two programs, while honestly budget dust, have done exceptionally well. So I think you need to reward success. It is, frankly, both programs are, in my view, wholly inadequate to the challenge. I mean, we are talking together, I believe, well under $100 million in funding. That is not close to what I think is required to keep America competitive and stimulate the industrial base. But if it were me,
10 or 20 oil wells. That's it.
Yes, it's tiny. And when you consider the gearing ratio of what, now let me point out, right, that neither the Naval Research Lab nor the Air Force Research Lab programs are designed to create an operational capability and certainly not an economic capability. They are doing the fundamental research just like Thai Nation experiments did for GPS. And the work that they are doing, probably among its most important benefits is just allowing the broader community, especially of the investor and the political class, to take seriously an idea, that was trapped in the space advocacy community. And it creates, a body of individuals who are cognizant of the technology and its limits and its hardware. And, some of those folks will stay, in military labs. Others may leave and join the private sector and help out in startups. But essentially, I would reward who already has the flag and give them more, a lot more, like, no less than twice what they're getting. I easily think that you could absorb 10 times what they're doing without that money being wasted over the next, 5 years or so. And then, I think, but what's inadequate about that is, these are these are very small scale, efforts to pursue sort of single lines of effort. And we know that there are vastly different architectural possibilities. None of the effort right now is going into thinking about architectures for using lunar resources and maturing that technology. We have not seen any kind of organized attempt by the Department of Commerce to try to make something happen. We have not seen any Space Act agreements. And of course, simple things that could move along the path, would be power purchasing agreements from NASA, seeking, infrastructure for their lunar base efforts. And of course, as I've said, it is failing what our nation could be merely to return people to the moon and have them practice their camping gear to go to Mars, when they could be creating the fourth industrial revolution. And while there are a plethora of things that you could do industrially on the moon, the path to solar power satellites basically leads through all of them. If you focus NASA on maturing the capability to produce, say, 90% of the mass and components of a solar power satellite from lunar materials, you are going to develop all kinds of things: in situ power, in situ mining, the transformation of regolith into metals and silicon, the ability to fabricate things in space. And all of that translates to a much vaster industrial base of what we could do in space, as well as the ability to rapidly scale one day, to 3,000 solar power satellites and the equivalent of, 55 terawatt thermal of power, where, that is a level up for our civilization, and that is an ambition worthy of the United States.
Yeah, it's like the growth in computing power over the last few decades, right?
Well, that's the other thing, if you can, source massive amounts of power in space, you can also move a huge amount of your computation off Earth. And that, which is 10% of our electrical draw now, is another way in which we can make our future greener.
Mm-hmm. So it is time to move on, but I do want to ask real quickly a paired question. So first, the 5 million jobs that you've created, you've also talked about reducing other types of energy with which jobs are associated. So talk a little bit about how much of that 5 million is cannibalizing, just transferring jobs over that already exist, or transitioning people into those from existing jobs that are going to go away and into the new ones. And then talk about the industrial base report, which you kind of talked about a little, you talked a little in general terms, but just say why that matters.
All right, so let me do the second one first. So if you have not read the excellent report put out by the Space Force Air Force Research Lab and the Defense Innovation Unit, the State of the Space Industrial Base 2020, it is the closest thing to a master plan and get well series of things for the nation to do. I really applaud the organizers of that and all the participants from industry and academia and government. It was really a whole of nation effort to provide that get well plan, and I certainly think it would benefit from much more attention. Let me just be clear that although I do think we're at a sort of a TV rural electrification moment, we as a nation are not ready at this moment to just start building an endless number of solar power satellites, right? There is precursor research, the foundational things that have to be done to get us to that point. And, so there's no imminence of job loss. And even once you start, right, the rate that solar power satellites will come on will initially, struggle just to keep up with the 2.3% growth or retirement of infrastructure. So I don't think that, you have a near-term problem. But once we see the first commercial, economically successful solar power satellite for baseload, at that point, the United States will need to think very seriously about what an optimal transition strategy is. And some of those jobs, are going to be jobs that can translate. Others are going to be in very different industries. Some of those industries may be in, downstream petroleum products. Some of those industries may be in, in space solar power factories. But I also expect that there will be entirely new industries that will be created. But no transition, is not going to be without some displacement, and we need to think hard about how to minimize that. But I don't see that as that is a problem that I would love to imagine we would have in 10 years, but I think it's more likely that we would start thinking about that problem in 20 years.
And we'll get the practice that we're getting now in transitioning jobs into renewables, how that's working, how that pattern goes. So appreciate your comments so much. Thank you for your active participation and leadership on this Conversations for the Future, Pete.
Thank you so much.